keep the car running. And the fingers swallow my pollen. Gold, I swam into your spell. On the ride of God we fell. You were plush and dolly bed. You had me howling cold. I fell into your skin. On the night you led me under your sin. You had me howling. You had me howling.
Test, micro, test, test. Test, 1, 2, check, check. Test, 1, 2.
Nice. You look now. Yeah. No, it's really well done. Really good here. And technique. We can take.
And that microphone works?
Yes, yes. But you have to.
So one microphone like for us and one like there.
You have to line this up. What they explained only is that you have to speak close to the microphone.
I will. Yes. No.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Seems okay. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are really happy to welcome you here today with us in the sunny Brussels. Who could expect? But Belgian weather is apparently changing. We feel like in Greece or in Spain now, but let's enjoy the nice weather. So we are really happy to have you with us today for this final conference event for 3 projects, for eNOTICE, Proactive, and PANDEM-2. PANDEM-2, of course, it is even better than was PANDEM-1, but difficult to be better, but it was even better. So we are warmly welcoming everybody who are here with us in person now in this meeting room. And we are welcoming everybody who is following us online via YouTube streaming. If there are questions during the talks, after the talks, please don't hesitate, of course, and we will answer all the questions from the audience, both present here in the room and questions following on YouTube. So we have a very tight agenda for all these 3 days. The day 1 will be mainly, so after the overview of 3 projects in a sequence, then we will have a talk of a partner who is a partner both in eNOTICE and Proactive, sharing experience from both projects. And then we will have a panel discussion for eNOTICE partners, and then there will be panel discussion for Proactive partners. Day 2 will be mainly dedicated to, many panel discussions and talks. So we will all dedicate a lot of time to deliver the main key messages about our projects, about our findings, about everything what we have achieved during these years in our projects. In my overview, for example, for eNOTICE, I will be rather generic to give you an idea what we have done, but the major lessons learned, key messages, they will be delivered during these days. Because if I need to speak alone about everything what we have, for example, found in eNOTICE, I will have to take 2 days myself, which is absolutely not my objective. So let me start with an overview of eNOTICE. eNOTICE is a network of practitioners. We started eNOTICE 6 years ago. I'm even afraid to say about it. 6 years ago, it is not a mistake, because initially the project was meant for 5 years, but then due to pandemic time, we had to be extended by 1 year because we needed to implement all our activities according to the grant agreement. So we needed to extend by 1 year, and we did it together with Proactive project, because Proactive also had their activities with us. So we made it together in the same boat, let's say. Okay. We started this network of practitioners from the idea which we got since many, many years ago. We started to think how to bring together practitioners and users of CBRN technologies and technology developers, innovators. How to bring them together. Seemingly these 2 different worlds, completely different worlds, which before did not really work together so much. In every European project, in every national project, it was always a discussion. How do we put people together? And then we thought, okay, maybe there is one place where they can come together. It is the training centers. Because training center is a place, CBRN training center is a place where all kinds of practitioners of all disciplines come to train like every day. And there, technology providers, innovation providers can come to test their technologies, to validate their tools with their practitioners in the field. And we thought, okay, this is the reason why we need to put training centers in the focus of attention. We put them in the center. So we started to build this community, this consortium, We have, in the core consortium, we have 12 partners consisting of civilian and military training centers. The majority are civilian training centers and research organizations and NGOs from, oops, why so quickly? From Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, UK, Turkey. And we have 3 military training centers. One NATO-accredited training center in Vyshkov, based in Czech Republic, War Studies University in Warsaw in Poland, and Rieti School in Italy. So civil-military cooperation is already present, very much present in the consortium already, and we see that from this bottom-up approach, civil-military cooperation works absolutely perfect. We identified so many common points which we can really share, which civilian side can share with the military side and vice versa. It is really cross-feeding approach. When we speak about cross-military, civilian-military cooperation at the higher level, there my eNOTICE partners can, from Vyshkov, they can comment much more about it, because at higher levels it works much more difficult. But at our level, at the operational level, at the training level, it works absolutely brilliant, and we are really happy to launch this initiative and to succeed with it. So we started this network. As you can see, okay, we have the network in the current status. It is this consortium of eNOTICE. It is the larger network of training centers, which we have 51 right now. This is the status, the number of training centers in the network. We are very active part of CERIS community and Disaster Resilience Society, Siberian pillar. We have been active with it since the very beginning, when it was yet called Community of Users, but now it is CERIS, okay? And the network has already proven to be strategic from the policy point of view. So we work together a lot in collaboration with DG Home, DG ECO, DG INPA, HERA, SANTE, of course, military organizations, NATO, EDA, EDF, so all kinds of agencies, because, okay, the network is really strategic, and we are going to maintain it like this, and we will further develop it like this. The network, as I said, was brought together to work with 2 communities. So the community of practitioners, the end users of technologies, and they provide the training, they know their procedures, they test and validate the technologies, the innovations, and they do procurement for these technologies. And on the other, of course, from this practitioner side, so it is, okay, practitioners from the training centers and all the organizations around who come to train there. And there are, of course, established networks of practitioners, also funded by the European Union. They are including No Fears, FIREIN, Medea, Dernet, so everybody who has a CBRN component. And of course, we collaborate also with IFA-Free. We know them well, they know us well, so it is absolutely a must to deal with them. And the other community, the technology providers, technology suppliers, innovators on the industrial and research side. Here we have a lot of works with them since another project which was called Encircle. It was a CBRN cluster, which also was coordinated by our lab. So there, and I think that some of you here in the audience, you know Encircle, and probably there are also projects here which are part B of the cluster, which actually develop the technologies following the gaps and needs identified in the cluster. So this is the community which likes to come to training centers and to test and validate the technologies, to meet the practitioners in the field, and to be sure that the technologies of different maturity levels ultimately will be demanded by the end users. This is something what we want to ensure, that it is a win-win situation. The practitioners, the training professionals, they get the technology ultimately what they are waiting for, what is really up to their needs, which meets their needs, and the technology providers, they are in good position to provide exactly what the end users expect. So this is what is the ultimate goal of our work and what we want to do. And from this side, of course, from the technology supplier side, we work with plenty of research and development projects, current CBRN projects, and which recently finished and currently ongoing, and we will be working with the future ones will be coming because, okay, this is a really important pillar for us. So eNOTICE has achieved all the objectives what was said initially in the proposal, in the project. So we created this framework for building the functional, operational network of CBRN training centers. We have identified and mapped training centers all across Europe. We have found 216 training capacities. 51 of them decided to join the network. Not all of them are only from European Union. We have, out of these 15 training centers, we have training centers from 22 countries. 17 countries are from European Union and 5 countries outside European Union. Anyway, it is also good to collaborate. Training centers of European Union, they are very interested to work with training centers which are outside European Union because it is always cross-fertilization, exchange of trainees, exchange of procedures, exchange of trainers. It is something what we pursue. So it is okay that we are called European network, but still it does not prevent us from inviting other members from outside European Union as well. And our main mechanism for networking has been the implementation of joint activities. Joint activities, it is field exercises, tabletops, simulations, serious games, which we had plenty, numerous during the project. Of course, we analyzed them. We analyzed how we prepare them, how we organize them, how we derive the lessons learned from them, how we report on them, what is the follow-up. So we developed the methodology, which is available to all network members. So any training center can use it and hopefully will find it and finds it useful for their own daily activities. And all the information about network training centers is put on the catalog, on the web-based online platform, which is, of course, it serves as the main dissemination and communication platform for the network. There in the catalog, you can find the description of all the training centers of the network, and they all are labeled with the capacity, so-called capacity label. We do not judge anyone. All this capacity label is created based on the information which training centers gave to us themselves, describing what kind of training they do, if it is only civilian or only military, or they can accept both sides trainees, if it is monodisciplinary or multidisciplinary, what kind of theoretical courses and practical training they are doing, and okay, all this information with the labels you can find in the catalog of eNOTICE. And of course, we are looking into the future, and we have established certain sustainability strategy, because eNOTICE project is coming to the end very soon, this summer, but it does not mean that the network is coming to the end, not at all. Network is only starting. So we have provided the mechanism, and we understood what needs to be done, and we have identified plenty, really plenty of gaps and needs on the operational side and training side and technological side. And now it is the time to really implement all this, so logically. This is how the catalog looks like. It is just a fragment from the website, okay? If you go there, you can see all the information about training centers. This is the training centers, the whole of them listed. I will not enumerate them all because, okay, 51, it's a lot, but okay, they all are there. So the main thing what we have done as the major thing in the network, it is this joint activities. what is the principle of joint activities is that every the training center of the consortium was hosting at least one exercise, at least one. Some hosted two. So the exercise was not specially made for the project. It was a normal training curriculum of the training center. And they decided to open up this joint activity to other stakeholders, to invite other research and development projects, to invite, of course, other representatives from other training centers to come and see what they have. And policymakers, of course, they always participated in our exercises at the European level or at the national level or the local, regional level, but okay, policymakers are always interested in these activities. By this, the main thing is that it is about pooling and sharing resources. So by organizing such activities within such a community, it saves the money, it saves the budget. So that's why we decided that, okay, we want to continue this kind of activities in the future network. The methodology, you can, all this information is public, all the deliverables, all the reports and methodology is public, so you can visit the website and see in the deliverables, in the reports, all the templates, the checklists about the preparation, organization, implementation of joint activities, evaluation, deriving lessons learned, and follow-up. So it's all there. We have implemented at least 9 joint activities before the pandemic in the various countries of Europe. You can see them all listed. Then, during the pandemic, of course, it was more difficult. Face-to-face meetings were not possible, so we, to keep the dynamics, we organized webinars, online meetings. We did it on just-in-time training. We did a webinar in counterterrorism CBRN measures, on virtual reality training, and on COVID impact on training centers. And some policy meetings were also organized online because, okay, it was not possible otherwise. But then we resumed face-to-face joint activities. Thanks to this extension by 1 year, we could do it. And so we completed everything what we planned. And today we are at the final conference and everything is done exactly according to the plan. Okay, not to take too much time, I would like to show you the video of the project, which was mainly shot during our last final exercise hosted by eNOTICE Training Center Campus Vesta and with participation of Proactive project with us. May we launch the video?
In a time of emergency, we launched eNOTICE, a European program built with one goal: neutralizing threats and hazards that are chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear. The program created a European network of the most advanced practitioners who united a European network of training centers, testing and demonstration sites to share practices during field exercises and simulations. So when a threat knocks on the door, we can act promptly and efficiently across all EU territories. This cutting-edge training was achieved through a sequence of 17 joint activities.
I see it as a very bright future, actually, because it has an extremely high strategic value at 2 levels, at the individual level for all those institutions that will participate to the network or has participated to the network, and this will extend. There is no doubt about it, but also collectively because we are building a really strong community.
I do believe that a stronger network of European practitioners and CBRN first responders is very important, especially in the current given situation where collective defense is getting more and more important, and therefore the civilian and military resilience is very much important, and therefore not only the European entities must work closer together, but also the military, NATO and EU.
I think a stronger European network is essential to the stronger European CBRN to compare or to react on a situation. So as a training center, I need to connect with other training centers in Europe, but also abroad, to maintain the level of knowledge, to maintain the level of exercises. And that's what we did today, and I'm very glad to be a partner of it.
eNOTICE project is a project focused on establish some network. CBRN domain has a lot of faces. We try to identify a lot of them during our joint activities. It is a great opportunity to increase awareness, not only for us, for policymakers.
So today I saw quite young recruits dealing with a complex situation. So they were having to think about contamination, they were having to think about different gradings of injuries, and they were having to acknowledge and deal with people's vulnerabilities. And for young recruits, it was really phenomenal what I saw. And what I saw the most that I will take home with me is the compassion, the pace that they took, the eye contact, the communications.
I think what was so special about today was it was a very complex, very big scenario with vulnerable people in it as well. So it was in that sense a very good reflection of society. I think that's very important when we're talking about actual disasters, to know not only the trained role players you can come across, but actually the real people you can come across. And I think that was the biggest lessons learned.
I feel honored to coordinate this wonderful team of professionals, civilian and military experts who are dedicated to the European CBRN security in the face of the current and emerging challenges. Okay, here we go. This video is put on the USB keys, which you received in the pack, in your bag, so you can have it. So thank you very much for attention. I am done with the overview of eNOTICE project, and I am inviting Grigori Havernianu, the coordinator of Proactive project.
Thank you very much, Olga. And very nice video, by the way. Congratulations. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome also from my side and from our side, all the people at Proactive, to our joint final event in Brussels. I have the difficult mission to give you one of the, I would say, final Proactive presentations. We're at the final event. Who can believe we're almost at the end of a long, long journey. So yes, the Proactive project, which is coordinated by the International Union of Railways based in Paris. Okay, now it moves. So what I would like to do is share with you a few key facts and figures about Proactive, where we are today. We still have 2 months left. We end the project in August. So as you imagine, most of our results are ready already. Talk a little bit about the stakeholder engagement and synergies with other EU-funded projects, because this is a core dimension of our project, and highlight a few of the most notable results that will be also discussed in more detail later during the conference. So first thing, here you can see really some key highlights, key facts about our project. Proactive is very complementary to eNOTICE, which is a coordination and support action. Unlike eNOTICE, Proactive is a research and innovation action, which started in May 2019 and which runs for 52 months, so not 6 years, but almost 4 years and a half. So quite a long, and it's a bit younger, it's a bit a younger project than eNOTICE. So when we prepare this proposal, you know, you run the proposal, you try to build the consortium and try to convince the European Commission that it's a valuable research proposal. eNOTICE was already running at the time, so we thought to find an interesting way to cooperate and to foster synergies from the beginning. As usual with these EU-funded projects, you need a core team, which is the consortium, so we have that, and I will give you a bit more details about the consortium partners later. Beyond the consortium, we also try to build a network of stakeholders, both practitioners and civil society organizations, to build synergies with other ongoing projects, and to conduct our research activities through a mix of methods that are based on social sciences, because Proactive looks at CBRN from human factors, psychological perspectives, behavioral science. So it's a different approach compared to many other ongoing projects working on CBRN, and this makes our project a bit unique. Also, besides the research we perform, there are 3 field exercises that have been carried out in partnership with eNOTICE, and we'll get to that in a bit. And also, as an innovation project, we developed some new tools, some innovative tools in 3 toolkits for practitioners, for policymakers, and for society at large. I would like now to go in a bit more detail on all these elements, and also take this opportunity to thank all the Proactive consortium partners for their commitment over the 50 months now that the project has been running, but the job is not over yet. We still have some things to finalize until the end of August. You can see from the map that we tried to have a good balance of partners across Europe, north, south, east, west, and about half of the consortium partners are practitioners. This was not only a criterion in the call for proposals, but it was also an important element highlighted back then at the community of users. Some of you may remember the community of users. It's the CERIS predecessor, and everyone was talking about practitioners being involved in research, working with universities, with other stakeholders in carrying out all these activities. So most of our practitioners are law enforcement agencies, because we work under the FCT topic, Fight Against Crime and Terrorism. 2 other practitioners deal with other sectors, a transport operator and a public health organization, and the other partners are SMEs and the International Union of Railways as the coordinator. Beyond the consortium, we tried to implement our research activities through a very strong social engagement. And this is very linked to Proactive's core objective, which is to look, first of all, at the group of practitioners. We all know in the CBRN world, there are all these practitioners that do their job, that have to conduct the first response, that will be there on the site when something happens. And Olga also mentioned, the training of the network of training centers. We all know the civil-military cooperation and all these things. But maybe one facet of CBRN that hasn't been tackled so much is how all these practitioners interact with the public, which are, in the end, the ultimate end users and the victims in an incident. And we know from some previous projects and some behavioral science publications and some research conducted in other areas that the members of the public, the victims, the citizen themselves, they can be an important asset during the crisis or during the incident. So one key question for our project is how to maximize, how to enhance in the best way possible the interaction between these 2 groups. How can practitioners better meet the needs of the public, and how we can maximize chances for the public to better cooperate with the practitioners and the instructions that they will be given. And in order to do this, we created 2, we call them advisory boards a bit in the project jargon, but in our case it's more than that, a very vast network of practitioners and civil society organizations. And just to illustrate this with the number, and to show you, just in terms of practitioners, since the project started, we've been in permanent contact with first responder organization, with practitioners, and try to convince them to join our project, to be involved in our research activities. And in this pie chart, you can see the breakdown. So more or less, the type of organizations that have supported our research and innovation actions. And they cover, as you can see, all important categories, we believe. Maybe it's not an exhaustive coverage, but in any case, we have all the important first responder categories, psychological services, laboratories, also people from research, academia. We also have the military sector represented, and also LEAs, so law enforcement agencies, both specialized and non-specialized in CBRN. We also developed a lot of synergies with other projects. We know that this has been a long problem, I would say, in the European research world, because until some point there were many projects performing their activities and working each project in their own bubble without communicating with other projects. This has changed a lot in the recent years. I think we all agree with this. The CERES community facilitated a lot these synergies. On our side, the synergy part has taken different forms and shapes, I would say, from very formal and well-thought cooperation agreements, such as the one Proactive had with eNOTICE from the proposal phase, to have 3 of the field exercises together, to mutual support, joint events, joint publications, and other things of this kind. And if you look, for example, in the conference bags that you all received, you will find a joint publication of Proactive and another project, I'm not telling you which one, on recommendations on inclusive crisis communication. And I think also the fact that we have a joint conference in Brussels these days also is the ultimate proof that we like synergies and we all work in the same direction. Some of these projects, by the way, will be present at the event, and they will be part of a very interesting project panel tomorrow morning, I think, and maybe some of you are already part of this project. As a research and innovation action, Proactive had a certain workflow to accomplish its objectives, and here you can see the main pillars of the way in which we perform the research and our activities. So, as I mentioned, we focused on human factors, so we had quite a lot of research on this part. What's the human factor part, the psychological, the behavioral part of CBRN preparedness and response? Then it's the engagement component I have just explained. In terms of innovation, we have developed a toolkit with different components for different target groups. So practitioners is one, policymakers and civil society, and the joint exercises to also be able to test some of our recommendations and tools in practice in direct interaction between citizens and first responders. And all of this, of course, within a legal, ethical, and acceptability framework that has been well defined and implemented in our project. This is important, I think, in every research project, but it's even more important maybe when we deal with vulnerable groups of citizens. Our research has been conducted via a mix of methods that in project jargon we call, I think, in the Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe program, social and humanities, social science and humanities. And you can see some key facts as well. So we've performed several systematic reviews of scientific literature, gray literature, and standard operational procedures that were public and we could review. 2 impressive studies with an impressive number of practitioners that have been answering our questionnaires and surveys. 1 study with almost 100 civil society organizations and more than 30 focus groups and workshops where we try to get valuable information from both practitioners and the civil society. So all these methods allowed us to collect research data and also co-create the tools that we have been developing. It hasn't been a development process that has been done in isolation just by the partners in charge of those tasks. And this is just to illustrate one of our workshops and the tabletop exercise that we had after a long time, a very difficult time of pandemic that we all know, after several lockdowns and when the world was coming back to the new normal and big face-to-face events could be organized. So we had this opportunity to bring in the same room citizens and also representatives of vulnerable groups to sit and discuss with practitioners on a concrete CBRN scenario and identify a set of gaps and recommendations that we can drive from that. In terms of innovation, I was mentioning the toolkit. So it's composed of a crisis communication system. We will have a dedicated session about this tomorrow, so don't miss that. But what I want just to highlight here is that for the general public, we have developed a mobile app for smartphone. It's available also in App Store and in Google Play. You can just flash the QR code and download it on your phone, see how it looks like. The idea of this app is that it helps, it's meant to facilitate communication between the public and first responders, practitioners, and also to help spread awareness about CBRN through a library of resources, so basically to facilitate preparedness, which is a weaker dimension, I would say, in CBRN. And also, more on further away, beyond the technical side of our results, in the toolkit for the public, in the public awareness toolkit, we have developed pre-incident public information materials. And this may seem and look very simple, but it is not. There is actually a lot of science behind these materials. They have been developed through a very long research process with information collected through an outstanding number of focus groups with feedback from citizens in various European countries. We wanted to make this as inclusive as possible. It will be open source, and then each country, each practitioner organization can further decide to use them or not, or to further adapt them. But we can make almost sure that they are understandable and they are somehow validated by an interesting sample of citizens in Europe. And beyond the desk research phase, as I was mentioning, 3 of our field training exercises have been conducted in partnership with eNOTICE and with the host institutions that are part of the eNOTICE network. One was in Germany, a second one in Italy, and the third one in Belgium at Campus Vesta. The particularity of these 3 events is that in each exercise, groups of citizens have been involved in the exercise to play the role of the victims, and in every time, at least 15% of these people were representatives of vulnerable groups. And this facilitated face-to-face interaction and communication between these representatives of society and first responders. On the proactive side, we tried to build from one exercise to the other one, and grow from simple to more complex. And there will be a dedicated presentation about this later on this afternoon. So I would just now like to conclude with the proactive framework and do a quick recap of the main results that are available for you, for the practitioners, for the citizens, and for the policymakers. Again, we look at the CBRN incident from a human factor perspective. We look at all the possible practitioner categories, how they interact among themselves and with society. And we develop a number of tools that are supposed to facilitate and enhance and optimize behaviors, interaction, and communication. We created an extended network of stakeholders. Based on all our research and research streams, we were able to formulate 11, so reduce all our body of recommendations to 11 core recommendations, which are evidence-based, to develop a policy toolkit, to develop a public awareness toolkit. It's the public information materials that I have just mentioned, a crisis communication system in which the app plays a certain role, and a very important tool for training centers, which we believe that can bring the proactive values further on, make them live beyond the project life. It's an aide-memoir for future exercises or demonstrations involving vulnerable groups. And again, in the conference bags, you all have a copy of this aide-memoir, both in the form of a booklet and a 3-fold flyer. And last but not least, all these events that allowed us to put citizens and vulnerable citizens face-to-face with practitioners and first responders to identify the gaps and important lessons learned for the future. So this is one tabletop exercise and the 3 joint exercises with eNOTICE. So there you have it, proactive in a nutshell, a summary of almost 4.5 years of work. I will stop here. I don't want to give too much details about what's going to be presented later. And thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to pass the floor to Moira Connolly for PANDEM-2.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is my first time here since before the pandemic, and I remember having a conversation with Professor Jean-Luc Gala and a number of security colleagues where there was a discussion about the role of first responders in a pandemic, that it was really a health issue. And I think one thing the experience of the last 3 years have shown is the crucial nature of the role of first responders and the security world in pandemic response. So in terms of where we are now, there are approximately 780 million cases of COVID officially reported as of early in May, and about 6.9 million deaths reported. But this is a gross underestimation of the actual burden. WHO reckons that about 24 million people have died associated to COVID-19. And these are people who, many of them died from COVID, but also died due to factors around the impact of the pandemic. So they may have died from not being admitted with stroke, or avoiding regular care, or having lost elective surgical opportunities. And the IMF has estimated the cost to be of the order of $12 trillion. And we're still dealing with the social and economic impact of the pandemic 3 years after its onset. So I'm going to talk about pandemic threats, what's out there. I think it's really important to acknowledge that the job isn't over, and the important work of preparedness is now ongoing. And I think the 3 projects are ending at a time that's critical in terms of ensuring the lessons of the last 3 years are embedded in our work as practitioners, whether within CBRN or within the health sector or from a security perspective. I'm going to look at the current focus in Europe, where we are at the moment with the establishment of HERA, DG Santé's work, ECDC's work in this area, and linking that to DG Home and DG ECHO's work. And I'm going to then talk briefly about the PANDEM-2 project outputs, which will be presented in more detail on day 3 of this joint conference. So what are the risk factors for the next pandemic? The reality is that issues like deforestation continue to pose a threat. We also have unregulated trade in high-risk species. We don't know where the Wuhan SARS-CoV-2 virus came from. There are theories that it may have come from a pangolin with transmission from bats as an intermediate host. Intensive farming practices continue to pose a threat from influenza. Biosecurity lapses in BSL level 3 and 4 labs leading to accidental release is an area of work that is relevant to all of us here today. Genetic engineering technology, which is advancing on an annual basis, allowing editing of known viruses and bacteria, so viruses such as poliovirus, H5N1 being tested for transmission in ferrets. The H1N1 influenza strain in 1918 has been reconstructed. These all pose threats to human populations. And leading into that and from that, the deliberate use of or gain of function biological warfare research. So in this world, both naturally occurring pandemics and genetically modified agents are all relevant to the CBRN and health world. So what pathogens pose the greatest threat? And I suppose the one we're all concerned about is influenza. At the moment, with H5N1 cases in Cambodia, but not good human-to-human transmission, but death rates of up to 50% in cases in poultry workers. There's also the risk of the resurgence of known diseases such as Zika, Nipah, plague, Ebola, Lassa fever, or Rift Valley fever. And then we have the issue of deliberate release. Category A, major public health hazards, are defined as bacillus, anthrax, essentially, Clostridium botulinum, Marburg virus, Ebola, and Yersinia pestis, which is the organism for plague. And then within our hospital settings, we have the risk of antimicrobial resistance, which are bacterial strains that have evolved to become resistant to our commonly used antibiotics. And again, that is a potential source of a future pandemic. Influenza is a disease that we're very concerned about. I previously worked for WHO in Geneva for 15 years, and influenza was something we monitored on an annual basis. And I was working with WHO during H1N1, and we were very fortunate during H1N1 because it was actually a very mild disease, but it led to a lot of complacency among our public health and security colleagues and defense colleagues in microbiology, say this was not a major health issue. What we see now is intensive farming practices increasing the risk of transmission to humans. And as I mentioned, we've seen increased cases in poultry workers, both in Spain, in Europe, on the European territory, and also in Southeast Asia. So where are we now in terms of being in June 2023? We essentially are 3 years and 4 months after the onset of the first few cases in Europe. We've seen an extension of ECDC's mandate with the focus on building their current roles, or roles to date in epidemic intelligence, risk assessment, scientific advice and training. The new legislation, the regulation to strengthen a health crisis preparedness framework, development of digital platforms for surveillance, and the establishment of an EU health crisis and pandemic plan and national plans by member states. And the Commission has committed to facilitate stress tests, which is exactly the work of Olga and Grigory, trying to look at how do we evaluate our level of preparedness, and that really can only be done through field exercises. We've had the establishment of HERA in September 2021. HERA's mission is to prevent, detect and rapidly respond to health emergencies. They're looking at mechanisms to ensure the development, production and distribution of medicines, vaccines and other key medical countermeasures. And joint procurement of medical countermeasures will be a major part of any future public health emergency. We saw the advances and the benefits of this joint procurement arrangement for vaccines in Europe during the pandemic, where countries, in small countries like my country of Ireland, were able to be part of a joint procurement arrangement, which made it a lot easier than 27 individual units trying to interact with the pharmaceutical sector. Key links to the European Medicines Agencies, ECDC, HEDEA, DG Santé and DG Home. So the background to the PANDEM-2 research project, and I had the privilege of working with Professor Jean-Luc Gala and Dr. Olga Farbanova for the phase 1 project. We looked at gaps in surveillance, communications and governance for large-scale pandemics. We had WHO Euro on the consortium and ECDC on the advisory board. The major gap identified by that project, which delivered its final results here in the BAO in March 2017, was that Europe needed IT systems to support preparedness and response to cross-border threats. And what we saw at the outset of the pandemic, that indeed our public health information systems were woefully inadequate because they'd been set up to monitor and manage outbreaks of measles, pneumonia, tuberculosis, whooping cough. So they were not capable to manage the data that was coming in on a daily basis from laboratory-confirmed cases of COVID-19. And the PANDEM-CAP resource modelling tool developed by my colleague Professor Jim Duggan in Galway, this was used to develop models by the Irish government during the beginning of the COVID-19 response. So our project partners, so we're a 2.5-year project. There are 19 partners in 13 EU countries. We were required to ensure a high number of end users, which I think is a very wise decision by the Commission. So we had 6 public health agencies, hospital, Radboud University Medical Centre, which is probably the highest number of EU research projects ongoing at the moment, and first responders, a key part of our consortium. The budget was almost €10 million, and on our advisory board, we have ECDC, WHO, and the Irish Defence Forces, and 2 of my colleagues are here representing the Irish Defence Forces here today, and the American Red Cross. So the aim and objectives of the PANDEM-2 project is to enable EU member states to better prepare for future pandemics through innovations in IT and training. So we identified, mapped and integrated pandemic-related data from multiple sources. We've developed a dashboard, a pandemic prediction and resource modelling tool, and a toolkit and training material for pandemic communication. And finally, we have delivered pandemic scenarios very similar to the model used by eNOTICE and Proactive to be used for cross-border exercise and simulations, because a response does not depend on IT systems or toolkits. It actually has to be used, and the networks and the connections between professionals in those exercises benefit the actual response, because you're not building collaboration during a response. It's often too pressured and too difficult. So these collaborations that are built and networks built in peacetime are what make an effective response to either a pandemic or a CBRN event. So we're going to do more, we'll give more detail on this on day 3 on PANDEM, which is focused on the PANDEM-2 project. But essentially the surveillance work has been led by EpiConcept, which is based in Paris, and have done a lot of work with ECDC. And they've developed what they call PANDEM Source, which has taken data from multiple sources, TESI, which is the European surveillance system for infectious diseases, WHO surveillance systems, InfluenzaNet, social media data, flight data, to provide indicators for situational awareness. We've also developed a social media analysis tool, which allows government agencies to monitor public reaction to public health measures being implemented, vaccinations, for example, or lockdown measures, and allow the government then to adjust its policy accordingly. Professor Jean-Luc Gala has developed a multi-parametric simulator which uses NGS data, linking the laboratory data to data on individual patients. So it gives you a much better sense of what the risk factors are for a future pandemic-prone pathogen. The dashboard has been developed by a company called Clarisoft. They've worked with WHO on the contact tracing tool Go Data. And the situational awareness tool is essentially what you guys do in the defense sector. It's making sure you have all the accurate data that you need to make a decision on managing a pandemic. So data is collected on cases, hospitalizations, deaths, testing, and contact tracing. And then the interventions that we collect data on include what we call non-pharmaceutical interventions, and you'll all be familiar with what they are. Maybe you mightn't have been familiar 4 years ago, but stay-at-home orders, quarantine, lockdown, school closures, travel bans and border closures are all part of the non-pharmaceutical interventions. And that's all we had at the beginning, really. We didn't have an antiviral that was effective, and we didn't have a vaccine. And then when the vaccination came on board, which was developed in record time, the first case was confirmed in early January, and we found the vaccine was available by December. That is an unprecedented timeline for development of a new vaccine. Normally it takes 3 to 4 to 5 years. Pandemic planning, this work has been led by the University of Galway with UCL, with the Catholic University of Louvain. So we've developed a library of disease transmission models to predict the progression of a pandemic. It's really important in planning, really important in simulation. And then linked to that is a resource planning system, so that based on a certain case attack rate, how many cases will you see, and what are your requirements for bed numbers for hospital doctors, nurses, ventilators, PPE, face masks. That can be planned to see how well prepared are you. We've also developed a self-assessment tool for workforce mapping, because nothing happens unless you've got people on the ground. You need boots on the ground, people in either the healthcare setting or in the public health departments to run contact tracing programs, to manage the lab data, to analyse the data and provide that information back to government to make policy decisions. And then Jean-Luc with his team here have developed a toolkit with guidelines, protocols and resources on biosafety and biosecurity. And this is for first responders, for clinical staff and laboratory personnel during cross-border responses. And you'll see there with the QR codes, making that information is readily accessible on smartphones to practitioners. Training and simulation, this is led by the Robert Koch Institute. The Robert Koch Institute, based in Berlin, is one of the oldest public health institutes in the world. The team there have developed 3 scenarios which are based on real pandemic events from peacetime planning to response to post-pandemic recovery. And the action takes place in a public health emergency operating centre, and this is in the National Public Health Agency. We've looked at 3 scenarios: pandemic influenza, Ebola, and a disease X or a novel coronavirus SARS-3 scenario. And we've tested and evaluated the PANDEM-2 dashboard in these both exercises. And the final part of this area is the development of an operational strategy. And our discussion over these 3 days will feed into this operational strategy, where we will plan how we will use and implement the tools developed by the PANDEM-2 project. And key in this is input from our colleagues in ECDC, DG Sante, DG Home, HERA, the Defence Forces, WHO, and wider stakeholders. And then finally on communications. And we're very fortunate during the pandemic, because we actually we wrote this proposal before the pandemic. So we submitted it in August 2019. And we were having to create synthetic data in the proposal. We had planned to create a number of scenarios based on accidental release of a novel coronavirus in Southeast Asia. So we would have had to invent data. But what we found is during the pandemic, we had huge amounts of information and examples of communications. So there was a knowledge basis was looked at in terms of establishing trust, how important trust was to maintain public commitment to the interventions, the whole area of misinformation and disinformation, and what are the lessons learned from marketing and public relations and communicating effectively with the population during a crisis. A portfolio of communication resources have been developed, which includes press release templates, so they're ready to go in the event of a new pandemic. And a media training handbook has been developed. And again, what we found is that that media training needs to be done beforehand. It would be the same for a CBRN event. It's too late when you're in the heat of the response to then look at your communications staff and see how well versed they are in dealing with the media, who can be they can make your life difficult if you're not well prepared and you don't have your message right for the public. So that's a summary. It's a whistle-stop tour of the PANDEM-2 project. I have to say it's been a real pleasure to lead the consortium here. Of the 2.5 years of the project, we have 6 weeks left. And I guess what's really important is that we make sure the lessons that we've learned, and they're hard-won lessons that we've learned during the pandemic, are maintained and embedded in our practices across Europe, and that we build a stronger Europe for a future pandemic. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Moira. Thank you all. Okay, so we proceed with the agenda, and I am inviting Liz Benson and Lee Kendrick to speak about, from the point of view of the law enforcement agency, who worked both in eNOTICE and Proactive, to share their experience, how difficult it was to work with us.
Succeeded. Good afternoon, everybody. It's always a wonderful opportunity to take time out of what is a busy diary, a day job, to engage with people, talk to people and share ideas. For me, I have the responsibility as a counter-terrorist lead within the UK of the CBRN response. I am often asked what keeps me awake at night. I'm often asked what's the most important thing to me as a police officer, as a person. And fundamentally, I always go back to one thing. We can't do it without the people. We can't do it without the people because we need the people to respond. We wouldn't have to respond to anything if there wasn't a victim. eNOTICE and Proactive, for me personally, brought the opportunity to bring those two things that are important to me together. If we help and prepare not only our responders, but also our public, we can hopefully do what I think everybody in this room will agree is the most important thing, and that's to save life. Then whether that's the lives of our public, whether that's the lives of our responders, that should be at the heart of what we do. But as a police officer and a law enforcement agency, it is never quite that simple working with partners. From my perspective, the most important thing is to manage expectations from the outset. I sat at a Proactive meeting and my phone started to ring. The first call, the second call, the third call, I found myself, thank you, Gregor, for your support, constantly excusing myself from what was an important stakeholder board. And the reason for that, when I sat back in the room, Lee, is there something going on? Yes, there is. Somebody's tried to import a radiological source through Heathrow Airport, and I'm being asked, what should we do? As law enforcement agencies, our moral obligations and our duties don't stop. It is difficult to explain that to some of our colleagues, where chronology, time sensitivity of response and activity is not necessarily linked to life saving. I can't turn off my phone at 20 to 5 this morning when it started to call about an incident in the centre of UK where somebody used a vehicle as a weapon and then continued to attack individuals with a knife. Somebody wanted that phone to be answered, and unfortunately it was me. Equally, as a law enforcement agency, we get told things that I would love to share with everybody. How does Novichok work? What was the difference between a Novichok attack in Salisbury and the one on the Valney? Why was the response different? What's the chemical properties? Does your PPE work? Does your DIM kit work? I can answer all those questions, but not to you. I can't, because if I do, I will go to prison. And as much as I'm sure you would send me wonderful notes to keep me updated around the legacy of the projects, because we're bound to do that for the next 12 months, I am told it is a lonely place. I'm a Crown servant. There are rules and obligations on what I can and cannot share. I'm conscious that those obligations equally apply to the staff and the wonderful team that I have who support me. But equally, refusal can offend. So you have my apologies, but I don't really mean the apology. I can't do what I can't do. My staff, like every other police officer, irrespective of the country, the force, whether it's a local force, a federal force, have equally the same obligations. I'd like to, but unfortunately, the answer is no. Whether that's proactive, whether that's eNOTICE, whether that's talking around training centres, or what I would or wouldn't do, or equally, what does it look like to be there wearing a suit? I'm sorry. So, how do we find the balance, and why should we, as a law enforcement agency, be involved? For me, it's quite simple. There is a common lexicon, a common understanding that's probably best described by that wonderful TV programme, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Proactive is like phoning the audience. The information that we give and how we prepare people makes them better. So if I do phone the audience, then they might be more aware, better prepared, and hopefully we can save lives, which, as I said earlier, is probably the most important thing. Then there's phone the friend. Both projects, irrespective of what they try to achieve, what their outcomes are, the real legacy is we are no longer strangers. We come back to the people piece, we are friends. So when I was faced with an incident involving ricing, I didn't phone my local scientist. I spoke to a DCI in Berlin who dealt with the last known ricing plot, who I'd met with on a European project, who subsequently invited me to their exercise and Lee's last September, where we spoke about stuff. And then there's 50-50. 50-50 is best guess, but when we, as subject matter experts, irrespective of whether we're law enforcement, policy, academics, behavioural scientists, when we have conversations, we actually improve our knowledge. So the odds of getting it right when we press that 50-50 button are probably better, not probably, are better than we started and joined these projects. I always articulate CBRN as a global problem with a local response. If you are unfortunate enough to be that local police officer, paramedic, fire officer, military, civilian staff who have the unfortunate experience of the incident on you, it's down to your local response and preparedness and capability. That global problem has manifested itself in the streets that you operate in policing, and unfortunately, all eyes are on you. When the project started, we hadn't had a Novichok incident. Novichok was a relatively unknown substance. We hadn't got the terrible situation that we experience and find ourselves with, and the threat within Ukraine. I was still voting Remain, and I continue to do so. I will always be an EU citizen at heart. And we hadn't had a pandemic that we have experienced. Did we know about the possibility of these things beforehand? Yes, we did. Have the projects added any value to our ability to deliver against these issues? I sat with Liz, social distancing in the UK, talking around what the pandemic response was across Europe. Was there anything we could learn? Could we do something different? But the end of the conversation was followed by, how are you? How's your family? How are you safe? Bringing back that people together. Can we make a difference? The box on the bottom left is our UK-owned policy document. It is the initial operational response. How do we prepare not only responders, but the public to respond to a suspected or potential CBRN or hazardous material incident? That was developed in 2013, and we revised it in 2023. One of the biggest drivers of the change in that policy was people. What we were able to build on was the exercising we did as field testing as part of Proactive. The engagement we had with Public Health England, that is now the Health Security Agency, as behavioural scientists in the UK, we were given opportunity to discuss that in Europe while seeing it happen with real vulnerable people. Diversity and inclusivity are part of our moral obligations. We don't do it through legal duty, we do it because it's the right thing. And having the opportunity to champion that and include that within a UK government policy change that involves all three services that we all buy into equally to make a difference to our public is a great achievement. In 2012, I was part of an operation to deliver the Olympics in the UK. The biggest word there was legacy. What happens after? It brought communities together, it brought people together, and so do these projects. The challenge for us all is how we deliver that legacy moving forward. It's not what we have done, it's what we do next. We've seen networking, joint activities. We have all been part of that because we had to be. We don't have any constraints around deliverables, outcomes, work packages, the bureaucracy of being involved in an EU project. But ladies and gentlemen, for me, working together, bringing people together, is what we should do for the future, and I lay that challenge to all of you. If any of you want to read IOR, it is there, it is available. We convinced UK government for that to be an open source document. Previous iterations were classified and as a consequence couldn't be shared. We've done that so people are aware of what we do. There are no surprises, and hopefully in that first 10 or 15 minutes while law enforcement agencies are considering what they are going to do, people can do things and are more prepared. Thank you.
How many do you have? Just the reserve.
So we have two microphones. Yeah, okay.
Check.
So we are now starting the panel discussion for eNOTICE project partners, training centers all around the table here, well, several small tables here, who will share their experience, who will share their vision of what they gained from this project, why they participate, why they decided in the first place to participate in this project, and what this project eNOTICE gave them, why they are interested in this network of CBRN training centers. It is not a secret that some of the training centers, it is the first ever experience for them to participate in the European project. So let's ask them why they decided to join and what they feel about it and what they felt during these 6 years of this project and what will be in the future. So first of all, I would like to, I don't know if I can, okay, not to overlap with anyone. I would like to ask, okay, let me first start with the presentation of every member of the panel. So, Professor Jean-Luc Gallat, eNOTICE coordinator and director of the Center for Applied Molecular Technologies at Université Catholique de Leuven here in Belgium. Then, just in the order of sequence, Adam Widżurek, from Warsaw, Poland, Scientific and Research Center for Fire Protection. I'm reading because I'm used to the Polish name, but okay, for the English name I have to look up in my notes. Yes, so Adam is representing the Civilian Training Center in Warsaw, in Poland. And the next, Adam Bagniewski, he is from War Studies University in Warsaw, Poland, so he's representing Military Training Center in Warsaw. Inspector Liz Benson from West Midlands Police and UK National CBRN Center, United Kingdom. Colonel Wolfgang Karl-Heinz Reich, Deputy Director of the Joint Siberian Defense Center of Excellence in Vyshkov, based in Czech Republic, international organization, but based in Czech Republic, okay. Daniele Di Giovanni from University of Rome, Tor Vergata, Italy. So it is a university, but their organization has a third party who could not participate directly in the project, but only as a third party. It is a military training center, Rieti School in Italy. Maaike van der Vorst from Campus Vesta, large training center in Belgium, Campus Vesta, which is located close to Antwerpen, where we had our final exercise in May in Ranst. Professor Elif Shorer from Ankara, Turkey, Middle East Technical University. Their training center, well, it's not a training center per se, it is a university, but they do a lot of training activities using virtual reality, extended reality, augmented reality. So all kind of serious games, simulations, Elif is our leader in that. And the last but not the least, Michael Dominguez from, again, I know the French name, but I will say, look up the English name. Fire and Rescue Service of Seine-et-Marne, SDIS 77, French firefighters from Gurcy-le-Châtel. Also rather large training center in France, and we had a big exercise there once. The previous one was a bit smaller, so in our mind we remember the largest one. Okay, so all the training centers of eNOTICE, nearly all. We are, I think, 2 training centers of consortium are not here with us for different reasons, which was not possible to attend. But otherwise, please take your chance today to talk to them directly, because they have plenty of experience to share. They are very professional, operational people. So we start now with Professor Jean-Luc Galin. Jean-Luc, from the point of view of coordinator of eNOTICE, as a leader, can you please summarize, let's say, the collective strategic benefits and lessons learned what eNOTICE gave us?
Thank you, Olga. So just first to say that it's no more a project, a consortium, or a network. It's becoming a family. And you know what I'm speaking about when I say family. So we are all friends. You are all friends, and that's how we progress with science and with security. Having said that, yes, I will try to wrap up, but you said many things already, so I will try not to duplicate. To wrap up at the benefits of eNOTICE to the coordination point of view, so the overview, and of course the specificities will be discussed by my friends and colleagues next to me. eNOTICE, in a nutshell, it has benefits at the network level and at the exercise level. So let's start at the network level. At the network level, it's a project that has reached a really high level of maturity. Of course, you will say 6 years gives you time to get mature or to reach this maturity, but this maturity is expressed by different points. First, we succeeded in mapping not all, but most of the European Training Center inside the EU, and even some outside the EU, which is also a point that was addressed in the introduction. So this is done, but we did more than that, because we also label these training centers, trying to characterizing them in terms of specificity, infrastructure, what they can do, what type of CBRN threats they manage. So all this label, capacity label, is now available and helps user to choose their training center according to their needs, which was something totally lacking before. So another point is that doing that, the network has become very visible thanks to an online communication platform that we call actually the eNOTICE Community Center, the ECC, that links together all these training centers, not only those from the consortium, but those from the network, broad sense. And this this communication platform is essential. That's a crucial element, because that's where in the forum we can exchange things and really at a fast speed get in touch and connect people together and all the training center together. So what is also a mark of eNOTICE that it's open to all professional training professional. Olga said that in the introduction, but that implies, of course, all and most of the specificity of my colleagues, police, civil protection, firefighters. We do not forget policymakers, and that's why I think some of the representatives of the Commission are today with us, or will be during these 3 days. And we do not forget also the technology suppliers and innovation suppliers, because this is an essential part of eNOTICE, or was an essential part of eNOTICE, is to bring innovation inside the network and to use these exercise, what we call the joint activities, to have a technological push or innovation push. So this was a major part of eNOTICE. But eNOTICE is mature because it has also been a step beyond what was expected. We have now contact and we collaborate with some very big institutions like IAEA or ECDC and WHO, ECDC through PANDEM, and through eNOTICE, and Moira told you about it. So this is a fact, and this built a really very strong capability and capacity inside the EU. What is also unique for eNOTICE is the civilian military dimension. Olga told you we have 3 major military centers, one in Poland, the one from Italy, and the joined CBRN Center of Expertise of Excellence, the NATO joint CBRN Center of Excellence from Vyshkov. So this allows the network also to give the project not only a EU dimension, but the EU-NATO dimension, where roles and responsibilities are equally shared between the militaries and the civilian. And this is really makes it a unique project and a very strategic one. So having said that, we have also to say that we support policy that is made, that is produced, generated at the European level, like the policy in security, in the field of security, that is proposed by DG Home or DG ECO or DG HERA. Moira cited HERA in her talk. So now this network is really perceived as a very strategic network at the national level, at the European level, at the extra-European level, but also by all network of partners that collaborate with us. So this is the main lesson at the network expertise or at the network level. Now, to be brief and to conclude, at the exercise level, because you know that joint activities is something that was like the core of the activity of the network, we of course learned a lot. We set up methodology to improve exercise, CBRN exercise, to better understand how to communicate between practitioners and observers, and this is something that is not obvious. And this was done to improve next exercise, and I think Lise will communicate her expertise as West Midland police officer about it. So we really exploit eNOTICE to be better in the future. Pooling, sharing strategy has been the key of this project, and it has saved resources, and it has maximized effect, and Gregory has told you all the benefits that we could record it with Proactive being inside the joint activities with us, and PANDEM also because they were bridged, even if they were not so formal, but they were bridges between partners and the 3 consortia. So innovation push allowed us also to concretely test new technologies inside the field because we inserted researchers inside our activities. And some of the technology at different level of maturity, by the way, was successfully tested and now implemented in the normal workflow of the partners. So this is also a major outcome of this project. And finally, I would say that GITT, just-in-time training, I come back to PANDEM. Because of the pandemic, you had travel bans. We couldn't see each other. And you know that eNOTICE is based on joint activities. Physically, joint activities means exercising on the playground in training center. We could not do that anymore. You experienced the same problem, but it was a drama for eNOTICE, where everything is based on joint activity where people are physically present. Of course, we can use communication platform, as we all did during this pandemic. Didn't solve our problem. So we had to be creative, and we organized tabletop, and we start discussing emerging threats together using this communication platform, and we realize how powerful this network is when it is to connect multidisciplinary experts from everywhere and building on their own network, so which amplify the access to the information and the way we can find creative solution to very complex problem. Could be ricin, could be Novichok, could be anything that you have cited, that you have heard the name of today. This is also the very strong strength of this network. I will now give the floor to all the other partners for the specificity. Thank you.
Thank you both for the floor about family atmosphere, our project, of joke, of course. I'm Adam, the first Adam, my colleague Adam second name, and today I'm representing a National Institute for Fire Protection in Poland. We are not a typical training center, but the many part of our center are firefighters, and we check equipment for firefighters and have a lot of experience in this area. But in our project, eNOTICE project, we had a general goal to build a network. Some part of that network was a joy activity in different countries, and we want to check two opportunity in this project. That's the first, international cooperation. The body of our project was international, representing different countries of Europe and Asia, and cooperation, military and civilian cooperation. There's a very interesting aspect of managing of disaster situations. And we, with my colleague Adam from where I study University in Poland, prepared two joy activity in Poland. The first was in L'Oréal plant, the biggest plant in Europe, and that was a chemical accident. And the second was the tabletop exercise in military university in the center of chemical center. And the first the international cooperation we checked with the German firefighters on the autumn 2019. We prepared with Deutsche Bahn, with the firefighter from Dortmund and our center, a joy activity in the rail station that was a chemical accident near Dortmund on the rail station in structure. And the result, that activity was very interesting because everything was worked. That's because with the first time use on this joy activity drone to managing of the crisis situation of this area, and we arrived with the Polish equipment, and we met with the German equipment, and God bless, everything we directly, and everything was working. Maybe everything was made China, of course, but that's a very interesting point, how to get the equipment with different countries. That's we try to remember about this, because we use the same technology, but we use a different IT system, for example. And transmission of the view from the drones on this very specific area was a very, very hard. The second experience was the from chemical accident in L'Oreal plant in Warsaw, when we checked the cooperation military and civilian and the private business. That's a very important thing, how to check it, this situation. And we use on this accident civilian security from the plants, military part from the chemical defense from Polish military, and Polish firefighters and Polish police. And of course, the general goals we get, but we have a knowledge, so we always check this cooperation. Thank you very much.
One remark, Adam name isn't so popular name in Poland. That's some coincidences. I prepare some remarks, one page of remarks, but I try to say some sentence directly from my mind now. I am a Siberian guy of more than 30 years. We provide training. I am responsible for providing training for military staff, especially for officers, more than 20 years. We talk about networking. Networking for what? We provide training based on procedures, protocols, doctrines, manuals. Somebody write it. But the threat is changing. We should see forward. What could happen? Yes, how we can predict, how we can be better prepared. I think that this project get for us a great opportunity to see different approach, because Siberian domain has a lot of faces. From practitioners' point of view, from university level, from different services, from military staff, and of course from civilian point of view. For us, what is very important to achieve multi-domain approach, to use new technology for training, for example, virtual reality, which is developed last year very rapidly, and to use some approaches from other countries. We are fully aware that each country has own law system and some limitations. These limitations in Siberian area are very important. And we, during this project, we identify a lot of gaps connected with cooperation between civilian and military staff, especially when we talk about some, not only exercises, really action. Vulnerable people this topic was focused in proactive, was very interesting for us. What could happen on the field? Everything. We see what happened on Ukraine, yes? The future, it isn't so clear what we thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. You've got a clap. You've heard Lee Kendrick, my boss, speak, and just in the audience, I also have Scott Howard here, who for our joint activity was the very kind and humble host for the West Midlands Police. So we talked about our strategic aims. Why did we want to be in eNOTICE? For us, eNOTICE is the little black book. It's the CBRN network of networks, so why wouldn't we want to be in it? And I think, as we said with Brexit, all our efforts after that we've doubled down on because we value this network so highly. The opportunity to be able to contact another training centre, a friend in a training centre, connect people is an absolute joy for me. It's my skill set. I would share with you, I am an oversharer, but I was nearer to 30 when this project started, and I'm now nearer to 50. So I feel I have learnt a lot. We've had a lot of fun. And we were told at the start, Philippe said to us, this network, this is to be like an octopus. And I took that very seriously, you know, and so have you, Olga. And we have paid attention and we have connected people. So that has been the faith all the way through. Our joint activity, Scott, when we came and talked about what we were going to do, we had a room a little larger than this, and it's how we exercise. We were told business as usual, don't change. So we didn't, but we had to change some mindsets, didn't we? We had to convince people that it was okay to have people you did not know in your room. And we had to convince people it was okay to bring research and development, or even, dare I say it, industry into our network. And after we'd done all that convincing, had a great time, executed it beautifully, turned out, why weren't we doing this all along? So now we don't even need to convince people. We brought a light bulb, you know, with eNOTICE, and that's our strategic aim. So thank you.
Already ready? Already ready. So again, Wolfgang Karl-Heinz Reich, couldn't be a more German name, apologize for that. I'm a CBRN staff officer with a career since 1982, so 41 years in charge now. Grew up luckily in the good old war times, so I still know how the Russians operate, how the weapon systems work, and I never thought that this knowledge is important again. So anyway, when we are looking back into the beginning of eNOTICE, we should take a look into the year 2016. Up to then, both organizations, NATO and the EU, were living in their parallel universe, stovepiped somehow, not working really together. Even most of the nations are part of both organizations. It was not possible, it was not the political will to work together. In 2016, there was a first NATO joint declaration on the highest level, signed, and then the situation changed. So in 2017, we as a NATO accredited Center of Excellence, one of 28 now, thought might be a good idea to reach out to the EU, or the EU reached out to us. I don't know exactly in which direction it was. Anyway, we met somehow, and we were joining eNOTICE as a consortium members in 2017. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the first NATO-accredited international military organization taking part into a Horizon 2020, now Europe project. And that was at the beginning really a learning process. We were working for NATO since years, and we know how NATO works, a little bit complicated. But looking at the EU, it's way more complicated, believe me. So, but anyway, on our level, we worked very close together, I would say. And for us, it was not only working in eNOTICE, but this eNOTICE project for us was a starting point. It was a kind of gateway to other EU-related projects, formats, and interactions. So eNOTICE served as a door opener for our EU activities like the EU Risk Mitigation COE initiative, where we regularly taking part into the annual conferences. We are providing our capabilities like training opportunities, even mobile training solutions, modeling and simulations, support their development of national action plans with our CBRN reachback capabilities, and so on and so forth. So there's a very good relationship now. And one of the organizers and secretary is part of the UN, UNICRI. And through eNOTICE, through this EU Risk Mitigation COE initiative, we also now have closer context to the UN. So again, eNOTICE is a starting point of all these kind of activities. We also taking part through eNOTICE in the Cerise event, where we provide some presentations, but also sharing some panels and even developed a kind of scenario-based discussion for many other projects as well. So eNOTICE is really a starting and entry point for all other activities we have now. And we developed in this 6 years now to the front runner in NATO-EU cooperation, not only amongst the 28 COEs, but in NATO as such, also in NATO command structure, because our legal framework provides us way more flexibility to work with EU and other entities than NATO command structure, being it the NATO HQ and others. And this is not our own statement, this is the statement of the Allied Command Transformation in Norfolk. So this really strategic benefit of eNOTICE for us was the development being a front runner in NATO-EU cooperation. So thank you all for this. But if you are asking for a institutional added value, so what is concrete added value for us in our Center of Excellence? So we combined our joint activities, 2 of them regularly, with courses we just provide. And one of the courses is the NATO CBRN Consequence Management course, which is a NATO-approved course. Usually you see only NATO military personnel there. And with regard to the eNOTICE joint activity, we opened it for eNOTICE participants, for training centers, for other Horizon 2020 projects, but also for the EU Commission members like the DG ECHO. And taking a look at the shape of this course before we opened it to eNOTICE and the EU, and looking at it now, there is a tremendous raise of quality. So the sessions are better, the syndicate work, the quality of syndicate work is better. When you have the chance to see how young military personnel discuss in syndicate work with experienced professors and others from the EU, that is a value as such. And this will be a flagship course now for NATO, EU, and civil military cooperation. And the EU is interested in to take also some portions of it to make it even better and to make it a combined NATO-EU course. So we are just in progress of this. So all in all, eNOTICE for our center was a big advantage, an entry point to everything else what we did in NATO, EU, and civil military cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. So my name is Daniele Di Giovanni. I'm here on behalf of the University of Rome Tor Vergata, that is a civil university. So something strange. We are not a training center, not a CBRN training center, and we have been involved in the eNOTICE project since we were in contact with the joint MBC Defense School of Rieti. We have we work a lot with training center, CBRN training center, since we conduct 2 master courses dedicated to CBRN activities, but we don't have facilities. We don't have our facilities, so we need to be in contact with more and more training centers. So from this point of view, the eNOTICE network is something that is really, really useful for us. Because when we started the project, we had already a network of 11 training centers. We worked with them each year for the new edition of the master courses, but now we have potentially all the training center of the catalog. So a lot of capabilities that we can add to the previous one. And then we have to consider that as a civil university, we are both, we work with the engineering department, but also with the medicine department. So these 2 main body of our university can now try to find facility where making tests, experimental activities, considering all the training centers that are in the network. We have now phone numbers that are easily available through the web page of the network. And then we can also discover in a really easy way through the capacity label which kind of activity they can perform or which kind of CBRN threats they are capable to train, okay? Another point that I want to underline is that that was a benefit for us from our point of view was the realization of the joint activity, but not as an observer, but as an organizer. Since we have worked with the joint MBC Defense School in the back office to the organization of the joint activity. And this is useful because we discovered some difficulties, some aspects that could be improved or optimized. And this is the work that a university can do or can help to do. So this, from our point of view, this is really an interesting and useful side of all the problem, okay, of all the activities, I mean. And last but not least, the activity with the Proactive project gave us another opportunity, the opportunity to work with vulnerable subjects. And we discovered that there is really a lot to do in that field. Again, we want to help from this point of view to overcome all the difficulties and the aspect that can be improved. All these things are only few things. There are more and more, but those ones were really, really useful from our side. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I am Maaike van der Vorst from the Campus Vesta Training Center. And I think if we're looking at strategic benefits, it shows, the eNOTICE network shows that training centers should look beyond their borders. And that they can do that now, where first it was just on an ad hoc basis with individual contacts that you just happen to know, and that you would lose if, for example, an employee would leave your organization. Now there is a network that is there, that is independent from you as a training center, but that you can still access as a training center. And that means that the coverage is much less spotty and that the knowledge remains. And I think it also shows that our raised awareness that even though our mandate is firstly to train local first responders, and I think I can think back of just the previous presentation that said it is a local response to a global problem, CBRN. We train local first responders, but it doesn't mean we should only look locally. And it actually shows that we need to use networks like eNOTICE to train our first responders to anticipate those cross-border global responses, but also to maximize interoperability in case of big events, and to anticipate into future needs, and to see how we can train for those future needs as a training center ourselves, but also with all the other training centers, and how we can perhaps use the infrastructure and the knowledge that other training centers have for our own gain and for our own benefit. And I think another very important point for us was the working together with industry, the working together with companies and with academics and research, and showing training centers how we can be a connector in that area with the joint activities, with all the examples we've seen now during the entire project, how we can take up that role and how incredibly beneficial that is for us. And like Daniela, I'd also mention our cooperation with the Proactive Network, where we had vulnerable people in our training center, in our facilities, in our exercise, and it showed for us, I think there's a lot of lessons identified right now, and we've had quite a lot of people from first responder organizations come to ask us more questions about that, and wondering how can we do this in the future? How can we work with that?
Hello everyone, this is Elif Sürer from Middle East Technical University, Turkey. So it has been a huge 6 years where we learned a lot from each other. At the beginning, maybe I can start with our institute's background. We are a technical university and I'm from the Graduate School of Informatics. We are an interdisciplinary institute, but we have never worked on CBRNE. So this was a huge opportunity and challenge for our institute. Previously, we were working with patients and mainly working on serious games for rehabilitation purposes, but this was the first time that we worked on the domain of CBRNE. So that was very interesting, very informative, and we learned a lot from each other. Because when we started this project in 2017, I think we were the first to think about adding serious games on such a difficult and serious topic mainly. And we were coming from the technology aspect, and practitioners have been coming from the field, and all of us had our different expectations and different worldviews. So we, as on the technology side, we were very much thinking about how it's going to be developed, how it's going to be published, and how it's going to be deployed, and so on. But the practitioners were way more involved on the human aspect of it, or realism aspect of it, and if it's really going to be a training. So it was a huge success in the terms of communication, I think, because we listened to each other, and it would not be possible without this true communication, and that's really a family, as Jean-Luc has mentioned. So what we had first done in 2018 as METO team with Armin was mainly helping to organize the tabletop exercise in Nîmes in January 2018, which was a hospital scenario on a tabletop exercise. And that exercise has enabled us to work on it as an IT subject on the Interface 2019, where we started to elaborate the concept of adding both the hospital scenario and also the BioGarden exercise from 2018 Brussels what if we were to develop these as serious games, or is there a way to generate some games out of these scenarios? So we had actually first developed a game developer based on scenarios. And then in 2020, just before the pandemic, I'm saying just because it was ended 28th of February 2020, and our guests from Italy were, they had to go from Brussels instead of our border. So it was just before the pandemic. And what we tried to do there was, at the beginning, I mean, we had exchanged ideas on the virtual reality, mixed reality, serious games, how we can involve all this technology, but as a joint activity, but also something in the field. So since we don't have any experience on the CBRNE, and we were organizing this as a university, what we decided to do was we have collaborated with the mining department of our university, and we have organized a 4-day joint activity where at the beginning we have started with a fully virtual environment of a field mine, where we have modeled it exactly as the same. And then we had also the virtual reality and mixed reality versions of the BioGuardian and hospital exercises, joint activities from eNOTICE. And then we also had a travel to that specific mine where we had tested the mixed reality on the exact mine, and then we had visited a real mine. So it was like a passage from the virtuality to the reality. And on the last day of the joint exercise, there was this serious gaming workshop where participants, 12 participants from 6 different European Union projects have participated. And also there were lots of game developers and experts on games on that workshop, which had led us to create new projects, new collaborations, and so on. So if I am to sum up eNOTICE, for me, eNOTICE is interdisciplinarity, and it is collaboration, and I really learned a lot from this wonderful team, and I'm very much thankful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's hard to speak after everyone. So I will try to say something not already tell. So I'm Michael Dominguez. I'm from France, firefighter from 1077, NRBC Center. I'm a firefighter since 20 years now, and radiological specialist since 10 years. I've started from the bottom as a firefighter. It was really my dream job. And as the year passed,